right, now let's explore the current state of supply chain finance in Nigeria, the challenges it faces, and the transformative role of technology. We'll also delve into how businesses are leveraging technology to optimize their supply chains, the tangible benefits they've experienced, and the emerging trends that are shaping the future of supply chain finance. Well, joining me now for this conversation, we have Oluseye Seton, is a co-founder, Chief Growth Officer of Vendorcredit. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So, so much playing out in that industry. How would you describe the current state of supply chain finance in Nigeria? And what would you say are some of the, challenges that supply chain players, what they're facing, right now?
Well, so supply chain finance basically tries to bridge a gap that exists. It's usually buyer-led. And so the situation is such that, the buyer, you leverage off the rating, right, the credit risk rating of the buyer to be able to offer facilities to the seller. In most cases, the buyers are large multinational corporates, while the sellers are predominantly SMEs. So speaking to the challenges that exist there, supply chains are obviously not immune from the macroeconomic conditions that, a lot of us experienced last year. Inflation was, it peaked up to 34.8%, and devaluation officially was about 40%. Energy costs went up off the back of the fact that subsidies were removed, and that affected both sides of, the supply chain finance partnership. Access to credit still remains a big problem. I know private credit went up to about 76 trillion as of November last year. But if you do what our private credit is versus, to GDP, and you compare us to other countries, even within SSA, you realize we're still far behind. I think we did about 12.96, and a country like South Africa is doing as high as 91%. And that affected the corporate sides. And, on the smaller side, that's the SMEs, they still didn't get a lot of funding. Family and friends still remain the major source of funding that they get. I think PwC did a report where they mentioned about 38% of the survey that they did. 38% of the funding was secured by from family and friends. Fintechs are coming into that space as well, just trying to ensure that there's more credit that gets to the hands of SMEs. Cost of funds was another huge challenge last year. Off the back of inflation and devaluation, the CBN had to raise MPR to about 24.75 last year, and 27.25 last year, and CRR to about 50% last year as well. And treasury bills were going out at yields at almost as high as 29. Obviously, what that did was crowd out the liquidity that existed and stifled access, increased the cost of funds for a lot of corporates, not to now talk about the SMEs that were in the space as well. So all these things, created a great gap, right, between the corporates, which are typically the buyers, as well as the sellers, which are typically SMEs. And supply chain finance was needed more than ever at those points in time, because the buyers had to extend payment terms in reaction to that, leveraging off their powers of negotiation, and pretty much passed it down to the SMEs who had little or no chances of fighting back.
Right.
So supply chain finance, innovative solutions like that had to step in to try and bridge those gaps and ensure that those partnerships continue to thrive.
Right. I guess at this point, everyone just passing on, the cost, and at the end of the day, gets to the end user. But talk to me about how technology is changing the landscape of supply chain finance in Nigeria, and some of the opportunities it's creating for businesses within that supply chain, within the supply chain itself.
All right, good question. So technology is coming in to revolutionize, or at least to support what the actual business activities are, right? So solutions like digital invoice financing, for instance, which creates marketplaces where vendors, who their payment terms have been moved up from maybe 30 to 60 days or 60 to 90 days, can go to these platforms and trade in their invoices to be able to take out cash. There are also digital supply chain finance platforms, which don't just deal with post-fulfillment finance. They also deal with pre-fulfillment finance. So those platforms are such that they allow retail investors or even institutional investors be able to provide capital to intermediate on the requirements that the vendors have on supply chain transactions that they need to fulfill on. Another thing that is still nascent but is growing is blockchain financing. Use of blockchain to be able to track transactions, be able to get updated information on transactions as they are going on, and it has its benefits on both the buyer and the seller side. AI is coming hard and strong in this space as well. There's a lot of data that is scattered all around the place. Expectation is that with AI and access to those data points, we'll be able to collate those data and then use that to have a fairer and a more appropriate risk assessment of both the buyer as well as the seller, which ultimately would lead to an increase in capital going in that direction. So a lot of things are going on that technology is doing, but if you're going to summarize everything, technology is driving efficiency in the space, right? Is expanding access to capital, is enabling better risk management, and ultimately is also even improving costs for businesses. So technology is doing quite a lot, and the outlook is even brighter.
Right, and it seems we can't have any conversation these days, without AI, popping up or blockchain. Definitely going to be an interesting future, going forward. But what advice would you give to, businesses that are looking to optimize their supply chain?
Well, for businesses that want to optimize, I believe collaboration is very key. You need to find innovative ways to do what it is that you're doing before. We're on the cusp of the fifth revolution. And demographics are changing around us as well. So there's a trend and direction towards supply chain financing, as well as the benefits that technologically driven supply chain financing would do. I believe, like I said from the very beginning, collaboration is very key, because what it allows people to do is utilize the data that you've been able to store on a lot of your sellers, right, to enable financiers be able to make a proper judgment or make a fairer assessment of the SMEs that work with them. So overall, I think the benefits are significant, and it only makes sense for everybody to move in that direction.
All right, thank you so much. It's great having your perspective today. That was Oluseye Seton, co-founder, Chief Growth Officer at Vendorcredit. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective.
All right, thank you so much for having me.